reality often isn't enough. For the majority of people, you and me included, sometimes feel that the mundanity of everyday life just doesn't quite cut it. There are certain days where you just crave for something more that this wonderful, still not enough world can't offer or provide. Hence, people tend to be attracted towards creative outlets birthed from people with wonderful minds, as they give a rise to numerous fantasies that can liven up anyone's life. From music to movies, quenching that thirst of emptiness that almost everyone has felt at least once in their lifetime. But those particular music albums usually stimulate us only in an auditory means. The other half is up to the listener to imagine or come up with. And with movies, even though they are amongst the best medium which lets us get away from our normal day-to-day life, an almost perfect blend between visual and auditory stimuli, they usually have an end, and there is a limit to the imagination up to which the viewer can reach to until we get reminded that it doesn't have anything more to offer. Hence the feeling of desolation after a show or film is over. Of course, you can always rewatch it, but it doesn't or never can match that magical feeling that one might feel when they watched it for the first time. Some of you might have noticed that I didn't mention books. Well, that feels, to me at least, like too much of a work, even though all my idols are just writers who either write jokes, lyrics of their songs, or scripts for movies. But books in itself isn't something that I'm a huge fan of. So, what's the perfect solution for this predicament that has fallen upon us, which can stimulate us auditorily and visually, that doesn't seem to have an end? Well, to some extent at least. The answer to that is pretty easy. Video games. Movies might be an almost perfect cocktail of stimulation that makes our brains go bananas with all those chemicals, but where movies fail, video games shines. It's not like there is no end to a particular video game, but some of them are structured in a way that can be pretty endless, or at least entertain one's mind for hundreds to thousands of hours. I don't think I have to explain what video games are, but to simply put it, it's basically clicky and brain goes with endorphins. As I said, video games aren't endless. Everything has an end point. But there is a certain genre in video games that are advertised as truly open, where your imagination can run wild for miles and miles. Open world games, and some of the sandbox ones too. Some of you might be wondering, what is actually an open world game? Well, open world per se is a game mechanism which gives the player the freedom to explore and approach objectives freely. Okay, it's not like those games are truly open-ended. It's pretty much impossible to make a diverse open world game that doesn't have any end to it without having some sort of gimmick in it. But that, opposed to something which is more linear and has a structured approach to its gameplay, then yes, it can be considered open world in the realms of video games. As that is one of the major reasons why people love to play those type of games, because as we all know, gamers are the most oppressed group of people. So of course they would like those type of games that doesn't restrict them in any way. On a serious note, a game where you can roam anywhere and do almost anything is really enticing. Or is it? You have to remember, we are looking at this whole ordeal through the lens of satisfying that emptiness in our lives with something that can fill all those gaps of feeling hollow. And what can be better than open world games? A place full of endless possibilities where the player is given the freedom of doing things in their own way or when they decided to do. But in terms of being creatively fulfilling, the linear approach or controlling sort of video games shine even more, as they use creative ways to implement that in their games. rather than just making a shallow, devoid of any personality, totally uninspired open world filled with nothing that screams creativity or someone who had a different or unique perspective while developing the game. Since it's majorly young people or someone who hasn't experienced some of the better games full of original or clever ideas, I'm gonna use my past reasonings here, as that was when I was really fond of those type of games. Around almost 10 whole years ago, when I was a small child full of nothing but optimism towards life, who wasn't as critical as I am now, but that came at the expense of being a bit dumb. Okay, a lot dumb, as I used to judge video games on the basis of visual quality, aka shiny graphics. And the other dumb criteria being, is it open world? That was all my simple-minded brain wanted at that age. Give me that and I would be occupied for an awfully long time. But in those days, open world games weren't that open compared to something like the ones we are accustomed with nowadays. We didn't have the technological capabilities of making a game of the caliber that we get in the current days. But the reason I am bringing that up because I didn't get a really mind-blowing open world game when I was really into them. So, what type of open world games were available at that time? Well, games of those sort have been around for a long time, but it wasn't what we're used to see now until Rockstar Games released GTA 3 way back in 2001. Which laid the groundwork of an open city game, and since then, that has been the standard for how open world games look and play out to some extent. And that was followed by GTA Vice City, a game which is most probably either played or in the least heard by almost everyone who had a PC in the last decade. An open world game which took everyone by surprise, that boasted a huge map based on the 80s Miami, which was surrounded by water bodies on every side, which the playable character was apparently extremely allergic to, dying right in the moment his body touched the water. It wasn't only him though. Everyone in that city was like an agitated cat who despises an ounce of water. Well, that didn't make the whole game any worse. It was quite of an experience considering how old it was. But it is a great example of a game that had the vision for great things but didn't have the technology to achieve it. An obstacle that the developers at Rockstar Games overcame with GTA San Andreas, featuring not only a bigger map but fully explorable water bodies, opening an entirely different door full of intriguing surroundings. It is a game that holds a special place in my heart, no matter how much I don't like open world games nowadays. I don't think I need to go into a great deal of depth into the plot of that game, as it wasn't what I liked about that game or matters in this context. Mindless exploration is why those games work and have been working for a long time, from riding something as simple as a bicycle to something really crazy like flying tanks. That game truly captured what my simple-minded, puny brain wanted. A perfect catalyst to just do batshit crazy shit for hours with no end in sight. As that's how my days in those times went by. Come back from school and just roam around in the amazing world of that wonderful game. But was it actually good? Or is this my nostalgia-ridden side of brain speaking, longing for those simpler days where I enjoyed games for what they were, rather than going on crazy thoughts like this one? Well, after the immense success of GTA San Andreas, Rockstar Games continued with even more titles. I didn't play a great deal of GTA 4, so let's just move on to the mother of all open world games, GTA 5, which is basically just GTA 4 but bigger, better and more fleshed out than ever, featuring a huge city filled with diverse environments with numerous hidden locations and items to discover. But even with all of that, I didn't like playing it as much as I did when I played San Andreas, which is almost 10 years older than GTA 5, but still gave me a better experience. Coming back to that nostalgia question, as I cannot justify as to why I like that title more than the newer ones, but it sure did have something that GTA 5 couldn't offer. The only one that I can think of is the fact that San Andreas is based on 1980s timeline, which gave an experience that you cannot get in real life. While GTA 5, on the other hand, felt a bit too real. From the fashion to the vehicles that were being used by the NPCs, it was just an imitation of real world. A good one at that, but as we all know, real life isn't enough sometimes. Of course, you can do numerous things in that game that you can't do in real life, but you can do that in San Andreas or GTA 4 too, or any other open world title for that matter. As that's what video games are supposed to be, and one of a kind of experience whose only job is to amaze us. But that amazement was already provided by San Andreas. The later titles, or any different open world game series, didn't provide anything unique, but the same thing just with a different outer skin. And that brings me to the next part. Why am I mentioning GTA series as a whole compared to the ones developed or published by various industry giants? Well, the primary reason being that GTA was the forefather of open world games, which popularized the concept of open-ended city, which we get in abundance since the forthcoming of that video game series, and another one being that out of all the open world games that I played in my youth, San Andreas was the one that I enjoyed the most. I think at one point I knew the layout of that in-game map better than the city I live in. GTA was the game that inspired numerous other titles of that genre which came after it, and some of the obvious clone-likes, who blurred the line between inspiration and just copying others' work. Some of those games have their own merits which attracted different sort of player base, who saw the potential of the earlier titles and weren't disappointed by the later ones as they got what they asked for. As all of them started strongly, taking some ideas which were established by various other games and giving their own twist to the whole aspect of it. Some knew when it was the perfect time to stop, or kept a smart pace of making better or higher quality games, while some focused on keeping the hype train alive, fueled by the blind fanbase who can't see the glaring issues of those certain games. Inspiration is what differentiates a good game from all the lookalikes in this open world genre, as that's how things are made. Nobody just gets an idea out of nowhere. One might think that, but there is always a small kindle that gives birth to that massive bonfire of ideas that is your brain, which is one of the reasons why I like playing video games, to witness the vision of other creative people who are way above my technical capabilities go wild with their imagination, which in turn inspires me to keep doing something that is out of the norm and different, at least in some aspects. The primary reason why I keep doing what I do, creating for the sake of creation. There can be numerous reasons why other people would like playing video games, but a huge one for me is being able to do something that I can't do in my boring and lame life. And the games that I really enjoy nowadays are of a such that truly offers me something that I will remember or cherish for a long time. Under those criteria, open world games should pass with flying colors, but all of them just sound really enticing on paper, but when they're used in a practical way, it's just plain and simple isn't that effective. There used to be something that would literally blew my mind away when I was young. A virtual world where I can do anything, a blank canvas of some sort where you're given the utmost freedom, but in reality, all of them feel shallow. Just a barren place where you just move from one place to another, as that's how they're structured, giving us, the player, the control to what to do next. Which sure does sound really fun, but that feeling runs out pretty quickly. More doesn't inherently mean better, as open world games tend to offer more in terms of providing the player with a huge place where they can roam around, basically being lost in another world that isn't worth your time. And in that terms, games which aren't particularly open-ended shine even more, proving that you don't need a massive world to make a game full of exciting things, as this is where more creative games take the crown of being superior to open world games who are busy giving the same experience that their own earlier titles have already provided. But even with all this being said, open world games does tend to sell more, no matter if it is actually good or not. The tag open world alone can fascinate a huge group of people. It was the trendy meta, just like Battle Royale. Every game tried to do that, no matter if that went along with their original title or worked in any way with their pre-established game. But having an open world or Battle Royale mode, a sort of game, will for sure garner a bigger audience and increase the sales of the game, which is how all those companies think and work, how to keep the money machine running. But as with everything, the genre of open world isn't the problem. It's the games who just dive into that pool of hype and just piss all over it with generic titles, churning out every ounce of money from their fans who for some weird reason still buy it. The lack of creativity is the problem, not the games, as there are numerous open world titles which are considered one of the best games of all time, and all they did was do something different with the whole concept rather than regurgitate the same thing which has been done in the past for countless times. Yes, the mindless exploration can be fun for a really short period of time, as they always tend to get repetitive, no matter if the world in itself is really diverse and full of life. Video games are meant to make you feel and witness something that you haven't seen or felt before that, a feeling that cannot be achieved in real life, a magical sort of place where you can accomplish anything given to you by people who made their extraordinary dreams manifest into reality, letting it float in this wonderful virtual medium. But what's even the point of it all when the genre where the developer can do from anything to everything and let your imagination go wild, giving you that childlike giggly feeling just feels so empty?